And when rapid speed down to 2,500. That's your
Point wherever you reduce speed to 180.
BlackBox.
57-minute cooking with Crisco or cooking with gas. All right, folks. KP's BlackBox here. Ian tells me that we are cooking with gas. Maybe I shouldn't be saying stuff like that right now at this volatile time that we're at. But anyways, we are recording.
Buttered flavored Crisco.
Buttered flavored Crisco we're cooking with now. So hopefully there'll be a sponsor one day. Buttered flavored is pretty good. And Kathleen and Sarah make some amazing cookies with buttered flavored Crisco. Hey, thanks for being with us today. Today is January 7th, 2021, 7 days into the new year. And as most of you know, January 6th of 2021 will go down in our kids' history books as a day that we're probably not that proud of, and kind of a black eye for the U.S. in terms of the behavior of our citizens. Now, me saying that, I know that I've probably already riled up some of my right-leaning friends. And that's not what I'm trying to do here today. I'm not here to go after the right or go after the left. But let's be clear about something from my mind's eye and from my humble opinion, which is, this is my podcast. And I get the opportunity to share with you my opinion. Now, my opinion's kind of like the old saying that I know many of you are familiar with. And I'll just leave it at that. Everybody's got an opinion, and everybody's got one of those things that poop comes out of, and it doesn't smell good sometimes. Yesterday, I would argue that what came out, what showed up at our nation's capital didn't smell very good. It wasn't a good look, folks. It wasn't a good look for the rest of the world. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to share my opinion, because I've got a YouTube show now, KP's BlackBox, and we get an opportunity to share everything between money and oxygen with my 4 listeners. We're trying to grow that. So help us by subscribing and liking. That's what they're supposed to do, right, guys? Subscribe and like. Is that right?
Yes, subscribe and like.
Subscribe and like.
And don't forget to toast.
And yes, I've got a toast today. So each podcast, we start out with making sure that we pay homage and respect to our nation's finest, our nation's military, men and women who put it on the line every day, still as a volunteer force. Nobody's telling them to sign a contract. Nobody's telling our military personnel that they have to show up. Hasn't always been that way in our country. I'm actually one of those young people that can remember selective service or the draft, because I'm not that young anymore. Shut up, Ian. No, don't. No remarks from the peanut gallery back there. But, you know, what we're going to talk about today, after a nice Johnny Walker Blue Label toast to our nation's military, is optics. So before I get into this optics conversation, let's do what's important and toast our military. And usually I have a guest. Today, I thought it was important to only go solo and share this instead of having the optics of another person. You're just going to hear from me today, and I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts. You can love them, hate them, lump them, take them, leave them. I don't care. I just want to get this off my chest and share with my audience kind of how I see things today and through my optics, through the vision that I have for this, these events, and where we're headed. But again, thank you to our nation's military. I've got a lot of friends, clients, and folks out there that I care deeply about who serve every day for the good of our republic, even when it doesn't look good. Thank you for what you do. We appreciate you. We salute you. Cheers. That's good. I needed that, guys. That was nice. So, optics. So optics, I was a prior Marine, which means I'm still a Marine. It's just a weird way of telling people, how are you still a Marine, but you're not enlisted, I'm not getting paid to be a Marine anymore, but once a Marine, always a Marine, okay? So everybody knows that. But, as an infantry Marine, one of the things that you learn in marksmanship was optics, and it's kind of the mindset of aim small, miss small. And what's interesting about that is that when you're targeting in on something that you want to kill, it's that aim small, miss small. But what happens sometimes in this field of view, kind of where I see things and what I'm honing in on, is that I can get tunnel vision in my optics. And I think that's a little bit of what's happened both on the right and on the left. And I would consider myself someone who is right of center. And in true transparency, I'm a registered Republican. Yesterday, there was a group of what I would argue is probably registered Republicans and a group of people who weren't just right of center, but they were probably maybe even far right. Now, I'd have a few of my friends who would probably also argue that in their optics, in their opinion, hey, Noah, do me a favor and let the good doctor in Maryland know that I'm in the middle of a recording, and I will be happy to call him back after our show here. There you go. We don't edit anything. Clients are calling. It's important to talk to them, but just so you have the optics of, I'm keeping it real with you. So again, finishing out that thought, there's a group of people on the right who I think behaved poorly yesterday in our nation's capital. I have a few friends and maybe even some of my own family members who believe that those weren't people on the right. Those were people on the left pretending to be on the right, that they were Antifa. And what I would say to the world, just in my thoughts, in my opinion, and having not even quite 24 hours to think through this, it's 3 o'clock. It was about 24 hours yesterday where shit started happening and just, the wheels started falling off the Republic bus yesterday. And what I would say to you, just again, me just giving you my opinion, and I don't know that I'm right, and I may go back and listen to this later, and I may retract some of my statements. I don't know. I really don't have a script. I got a few things written down that I want to talk about today. So a lot of this is just coming from the optics and kind of me from almost like a cathartic way, just talking this out to a camera that can't interrupt me. I can only interrupt my own thoughts here. But I immediately went back yesterday to some time almost 20 years ago. And a lot of my fellow warriors, sailors, Marines, Army, Air Force, Coasties, Noah, even you puddle jumpers. Love you, buddy. Love you for serving. But when we think back 20 years ago and almost 21 years ago, there were some optics back then of two airplanes flying into the World Trade Center, an airplane flying into the Pentagon, an airplane crashing in a field in Pennsylvania. The optics back then were for the majority of Americans that there was an attack on our homeland. There was an attack against our way of life. And I would agree that that's what happened. What's interesting is that there was a group of people who shortly after these attacks believed that we, the Americans, were somehow conspiring to attack our own nation and to bring down, once again, the republic. I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe that happened. But there was an interesting defense secretary during that period of time. His name was Donald Rumsfeld. And there is kind of a famous, or maybe even for some people infamous, quote that he gave to the press on a particular day about the optics of how we see things. And because we were kind of doing this on the fly today, I'm going to have to play this from my cell phone. If I would have given the guys plenty of time to prepare, I'd have been able to do this a little more fancy for you. But let me play something here for you. And I think what Ian will try to do is put up this interview that George Rumsfeld gave Errol Morris, who was a filmmaker, and did this documentary with Don Rumsfeld. It brings me back to this movie. And by the way, I think this movie is still available. If you guys can fact check me, this documentary movie with Rumsfeld is still available on, I think, Amazon Video and also Netflix. I would encourage you to go back and watch it, and watch this documentary about 20 years ago, and an attack that happened on our nation. But let's listen to Defense Secretary Rumsfeld. Stand by.
February 4th, 2004. Subject: what you know. There are known knowns. There are known unknowns. There are unknown unknowns. But there are also unknown knowns. That is to say, things that you think you know, that it turns out you did not.
Rumsfeld is one of the...
So, that was a little clip and a quote from our Secretary of Defense during one of the most trying times in, I'd say, since World War II, and where our nation was at war with, it wasn't a uniform enemy, it was terrorism. It was terrorism against our country. And what we saw yesterday, some would say, was homegrown terrorism that was festered by a sitting president. I think that may be pushing it a little far, but I also think I can understand why a person would say that. I can understand that some people believe our president has created more divide than he has unity. And as a figurehead in U.S. politics, the president is usually identified, at least from the optics, as a person who is to unite the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans. And what we're seeing more now is that we have these fringes. We have these fringes on the left, and we have these fringes on the right. I would refer to these fringes on the far left as Marxist, and on the far right as fascist. And what I've said over and over again for the last few weeks, and talking with friends and family, and just everyone putting in their 2 cents worth from their optics, their field of view. From my field of view, I think what we're seeing more and more is that the media is taking the fringes and making that the norm. And I've put up here today the optics of the media. So these are all live shots that I'm looking at on my TV screen and that you're looking at through a camera here. We've got CNN, MSNBC, Fox, the Financial Channel, I think that's CNBC. We've got the British Broadcasting Network up there, and I think over in the far right, that might even be TMZ. Is that right? Yeah. Oh, the entertainment world. I mean, those guys have the truth, right? Well, what's interesting, I just caught up there, China, Russia accuses the U.S. of hypocrisy. And in some ways, I would say that's a fair shot across our bow right now. Now, I'm not endorsing the Chinese or the Russians by saying that. But what I'm saying is the U.S. has been the shining light for the rest of the world for almost 100 years now of how to have the optics for the rest of the world to see that we know how to negotiate, argue, and settle our differences with civility. And unfortunately, I'm blaming both sides at giving power to the fringes. Those fringes I would define as minorities, not by color, not by race, not by creed, not by religion, but minority in population, that the fringes, these leftists and these Marxists who do not believe in law and order, who do not believe in a democratic republic, who do not believe in capitalism as one of the best and greatest financial systems in the world. What they believe in is absolute anarchy and absolute power for a certain group by putting themselves in a position of saying that we're right, meaning in their views and their optics, and if you do not agree with our opinion, we're going to shut you down, we're going to cancel you. And the cancel culture that we've heard about on the left, I would say the right has the same optics, just maybe in a little different definition. And what I think we need to come back to as citizens of the greatest country ever formed, and that's come back to the optics of individuality and personal responsibility for the betterment of your family, your neighbor, your community, your country. And what I'm asking listeners to do today is get this message out to your friends, get this message out to your family. And I don't care how many viewers and subscribers I have, not because I want more viewers and more subscribers. That would be nice, and in true transparency, yeah, it'd be great to have more people listening to our point of view. No kidding, that would be awesome. However, I actually care more about my country. I care more about the individual well-being, even if I don't agree with them. And I have people that I work with in my financial services firm who are, and my team back here can tell you, some people on the far left, but they are some of the kindest, well-meaning people that I know, but I don't necessarily spiritually agree with them in terms of my faith. I don't mind sharing it with them, and they humor me. They listen. They hear me out. And I respect that about my friends on the left. I have some friends on the right that think that maybe because I take a more Pentecostal view than they do, that they're sometimes harder on me than a person who's an atheist. And so I say all this to kind of bring it back to the optics. And I think what a lot of us are working with right now in our country, and I have to throw myself into this, I have to be aware of my unknown unknowns, as Rumsfeld put it. I know my known knowns. I'm aware of those. But there are also known unknowns or unknown knowns. And just because I have a view or a belief about something doesn't necessarily make it truth. It makes it my opinion. I hear it a lot that people will say, hey, Kenny, you have your truth and I have my truth. And I respectfully decline that belief system. What I believe is you have your opinion and I have my opinion. Let's not warp opinion with truth and truth with opinion. Because there are things that are absolute truth and then there are things that are just absolute opinions. And I think what's happened in our legislative process, in our executive process, and maybe as far down as our judicial process, is that opinions have got in the way of truth. And absolute truth has sometimes been blinded so much that a person's opinion doesn't matter anymore. Can you see how the optics of that can get a little weird and a little distorted? And I'd bring you back to the screen up here. From left to right, here's MSNBC. There's famous old Chuck Todd. The nation on edge after a pro-Trump rally. And now we've got Governor Gretchen Whitmire. And again, I don't have the audio, and it doesn't matter, but the optics of what that television station is giving you, or that television network is giving you. How many people can watch 3, 4, 5 different networks at one time and gather an opinion? So who you're getting your optics, who your field of view is on in that moment, I would challenge you to step back and go, okay, let's see what CNN's saying. Let's see what Fox is saying. Let's see what the financial gurus are saying. Let's see what the Brits are saying. Let's see what Hollywood is saying. You know, everyone's going to have an opinion. And what drives me crazy with media is that the media for the last year plus has taken this approach of going, let's fire up the fringes. Let's fire up the far left. Let's fire up the far right. Why would they do that? My opinion is it's what sells. Because if you'll notice at each one of these networks, about every 8 minutes or maybe even every 15 minutes, they break away. And they break away to do something we even do on our show, and that's to say thank you to the people who are padding their pockets. Thank you to their sponsors. If it wasn't for Kenneth Porter and Company, if it wasn't for Miller House, if it wasn't for this team back here of Ian and Noah, Sarah, Amber, Sophia, Isaiah, Jacob, you know, I've got a team of people that work with me to help me run our business. My wife, even Lizzie. If I didn't have these people, I couldn't do what I do, where the optics of what you see is me sitting in front of a camera pontificating and giving you my opinion and my thoughts. And so what I wanted to do today was just share a little bit with you about, hey, can we take a step back and let's go back to something that I was talking about with Ian and Noah today, and we were just wanted to do this special episode, was talk a little bit about, well, can you remember back when you were in maybe middle school or maybe in elementary school, and you took your first civics class? Civics, or civility, those root words of learning how to operate as a group of people with different optics, with different opinions, with different views of the truth. And how do we come together to create an environment where we can work under a rule of law to live peacefully and in harmony for the betterment of our neighbor? I've got a business client. Actually was talking to him at lunch today and told him I was going to be shooting this interview. He's a very wealthy man. He's done very well for himself. But I paid him a compliment today and said he was one of the most influential people in my life today. And people come and go. But this gentleman, for me, has shown that he can have a conscience and still be a capitalist. And there's a lot of people today who do not believe that you can be a capitalist and have a conscience, and that it's only about the almighty dollar. Well, I'm here to tell you there are still a great number of people in our country who really care about you, and they are uber wealthy. I can tell you there are a great number of people in our country today who are uber wealthy, and they could give a shit less about you, that they are narcissists, that they only believe in get all they can all they get, poison the lid, or sit on the lid and poison the rest. There are people like that. and how they made it to prominence, how they made it in their fortunes, I don't know. But I choose not to work with people like that. And here's the thing I want to share with you. You have a choice. And in the optics that I look through, every person has a choice throughout life. And the choices that we make, those choices are called behavior. Hopefully, the behaviors that you exhibit come from a true north of your belief system. And if you can look at your behavior and say, hey, these are in line with my beliefs, then those beliefs that you have, whether it be religious beliefs, financial beliefs, marital beliefs, your beliefs drive your behavior. And so when you're looking at the behavior that you exhibit, sometimes you have to go back and go, man, does this correlate with my belief system? And I'll be, again, transparent with you and say sometimes I behave poorly. I say words I shouldn't say. I make slanderous comments sometimes to the demise of other people emotionally. I don't mean to do that. It's not in my normal daily nature to do that. But sometimes the old devil on the shoulder wins because I have somewhere in my process fed that evil more than feeding the light. And I think in where we are today, we've seen that happen more so than any other time because of the optics, because of what we're focusing on and what we're giving power to. And what I would say to an audience today is really go back to your core beliefs and look at your core beliefs to see how you're behaving. And do those behaviors correlate with the relationships that you have? And those relationships that you have, do those correlate to your results? And if you're getting poor results, we have to backtrack all the way to beliefs to figure out why those results aren't what you want. You know, and I learned some of those things from this book on the bottom down here. This is Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles. And I think it's one of the best books that I've read, and let me get that out, in my lifetime, that has helped me really focus on my spiritual beliefs, on my business beliefs, on my marital beliefs. And I was able to take the optics of what I was learning through Jack Canfield's Success Principles. And let's make sure that goes up on the website so folks can download that and let you read for yourself. It's one of probably my top 10 books I would suggest to you. But as I look through the optics of this gentleman's teaching in his books and the success principles that Jack Canfield, who, by the way, also wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, if that rings a bell with you, that when you take the optics of what someone's teaching you in one area of your life, how does that apply to these other areas of your life? And I would challenge you to take a look at what's happened in our political optics and what's happened over the last year to year and a half, and how the media has really driven home the optics of chaos and divide. It's unfortunate. And if that is where you're getting your hope and where you're getting your guiding principles, I would tell you, turn them off and look inwardly at your true north. Look inwardly at your principles. And I would also encourage you not to back down from your beliefs, not to set your beliefs aside, but be willing to open your optics, to zoom out and hear another's opinion. Because it doesn't have to be your truth to hear someone else's opinion. It only has to be that you give them an opportunity to speak. Give them an opportunity to share and spend some time listening. When I get in the most trouble with my wife and my kids, It's when I'm trying to preach to them and push my opinion and what it is that I want them to do, because I want to be well-meaning and I think I have the right answers and I think I have the right strategy. So what happens a lot of times is I'm trying to push my will on them. Rarely does that work. And I think you can see that in your own life. And I think we can see that where that has happened in the media, where they've tried to push an opinion. They've tried to narrow the optic. But yesterday what we saw was the media immediately, I'm going to pick on the right for a few minutes. Even though I'm right-leaning, I'm going to pick on you guys. The right, and let's tease specifically Fox Network. Fox went from cheering on Trump supporters and pushing the rhetoric of the opinion of President Trump was robbed, his vote was robbed. And by the way, I'm not saying he was or it wasn't, but that rhetoric was pushed by that network. Then we have CNN, sometimes referred to as the Communist News Network by my right friends, and maybe others think they're the Christian News Network. Who knows? Who knows, right? Optics. However, when we listen to that network, all of a sudden we hear a different opinion about Trump supporters and how there is no evidence of any voter fraud. And what we have to do is step back from this and go, okay, let me hear both sides. And then let's actually go back to civics class. And in civics class, we learned about the branches of government. And that's where I had to go back to over the last few days. You see, there are really three basic branches of government. There's a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. And what I would encourage you to do is, I wrote some notes down today, but instead of just taking my word for it, if you still have any faith in your government whatsoever, there's some great resources on .gov sites. You can go to usa.gov/branches-of-government, and you can see the breakdown, and you can get as granular as you want in how our legislative, executive, and judicial branches works. But in short today, our legislative branches make laws, and that's made up of our current House and Senate. The executive branch carries out laws, and these are done through the president, the vice president, his cabinet or her cabinet, and other federal agencies. And then the judicial branch, which we heard a lot about that this summer when Supreme Court nominees were appointed. They're going to evaluate the laws that have been made by our legislative branch and carried out through the executive branch. And they're going to evaluate whether or not those laws fall in line with the Constitution. And the Constitution is our guiding principles for how we're supposed to live as citizens. There's some other guiding principles that I would also say that as Christians, we have subscribed to. And if we go back to the early church and even the Old Testament church, the Jewish community of where Christians took a lot of these guiding principles, and where I would argue that the world took guiding principles, was from what we would refer to as Moses and the 10 Commandments. Those were guiding principles. Those were the constitution of human beings across the world. And what's interesting about that is we don't always follow those guiding principles. We don't always subscribe to those canonized laws that have been in place for thousands of years. And I would say that's kind of what happened yesterday, is that people lost their shit yesterday. People lost their shit a year ago. in not allowing our branches of government to do their job. We saw it in riots with atrocities against people of color. We saw it in how police officers overstep their rule of law. We saw it in how citizens overstep their boundaries and did things to other citizens that were not lawful. And we've seen this over and over and over again throughout the beginning of man, all the way back to the Garden of Eden. So if you're not a Christian and you don't subscribe to life starting with Adam and Eve, then my opinion, my faith that I'm going to share with you right now will mean nothing to you. But you can go all the way back to the Garden of Eden and see the fall of man and how they were deceived by the optics that they were viewing through. Adam had a set of optics that he was viewing through, and he was only looking and not listening. He wasn't listening to his maker. He was listening and viewing how the serpent in the garden had given him guidelines of what the tree of knowledge of good and evil really meant, what the tree of life really meant. And he listened to the optics in which those words that God had given him now repeated through a serpent who wanted to manipulate him and his helpmate, his wife, ended up making some mistakes. And those mistakes had an eternal cost. And what I would submit to you today is that the mistakes that were made yesterday, while well-intended, they were still mistakes. I think there were many people, and I have some family members who showed up to Capitol Hill yesterday as people of hope and people who wanted to go there and simply pray over our lawmakers, support our lawmakers, but also in support. I can protest and support. When my kids do something wrong in my optics and what I see as what I would define as wrong, I'm going to let my kids know. I'm going to let my grandkids know. I love my grandson, but when he stands up and runs across the couch, there's a rule of law in my house. Don't stand and run on the furniture. And when Moses does that, I protest. I go, Moses, Pop said don't run on the furniture. Sit your hiney down on the furniture. Furniture is made to sit on, not run on. And I have to understand that his optics is, hey, this is fun. This is cool. Why are you taking my joy away? And it's simply teaching and educating and having the patience to be able to say to my grandson, well, this is the guidelines. These are the guiding principles that I have for my family and my house. And Pop bought this couch. Pop doesn't want it walked on. I want it to be sat on, laid on, where I can take naps on it, which I would do a lot, right, Ian? And Ian too. But hopefully you're getting that elementary thought that I'm sharing with you today is that the way we view things isn't always true. It's not always truth. And what I would ask my right-leaning friends and my left-leaning friends is you got to cut out some of this noise on the left and right, the far left and the far right, and go, hey, those people who are far left are radicals. Those people who are far right are radicals. And there may be an ounce of truth in what they're saying, but let's bring that back to center. Let's bring that back to a clear field of view, to clear optics, not foggy optics. And let's really look at what is good for the nation, what's good for us as individuals. And what's good for the nation right now is that we understand that the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of our government, right, wrong, or indifferent, has all said that we got a new president. And that new president is President-elect Biden. And within a few days, he's going to be our next presiding president. How long will he be there? There's a lot of people who think, well, this is part of the system, Kenny. He's only going to be there a few days, and Kamala Harris is going to be there. Well, okay. So if Kamala is going to be your president, I'm going to speak to my Christian friends now. If you're a Christian, is the God of the universe that we worship and serve still large and in charge? Who's our president? God. So if God has appointed Biden to be our president, are we not to follow those guidelines for the time that he's in that office, the same way we did Trump, the same way we did President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton, President Reagan, one of my favorites? People don't like him either. That's okay. That's your opinion. But we get to vote in our democratic system. And if you didn't vote, shut the F up. Okay? Straight up. Don't even comment on my page. If you didn't vote and you're of legal age, you don't have a voice in this. If you're not a citizen, you can't vote. Don't want to hear from you until you get your citizenship. Then, welcome to the USA. Until then, butt out. It's not your country. And I'm not trying to be a hard ass. I'm not trying to be mean. I've got clients and friends who are very close to me who are immigrants. And I just talked to a friend yesterday who's been a citizen for 3 years now. One of the most awesome people in the world, one of the most kind-hearted, gentle-hearted people in the world, a true immigrant who escaped communism through Romania. And that I wish I could get him on the show. He's just a very private individual. But when you hear this guy's story and you hear what his parents did in escaping and fleeing communism, even with all the crap that we have going on in our country right now, by far, without a doubt, this is still the greatest country on the planet. And why do we have wars and rumors of wars? And why do we have Chinese and Russians and Iranians, Venezuelans? Why do these people come at us? Because they ain't us. How you guys like that? They hate us because they ain't us. Now, that is a very pompous statement, okay? I slightly retract that statement, but there's some truth in it. There's a segment of truth from the optics of which I just shared that with you. I also understand that in foreign policy, our federal government goes out sometimes and creates hate and discontent because we're manipulating other people's elections. We're manipulating the truth in how other citizens of other nations and maybe even some sovereign nations, how they see their optics. Can you imagine being an Iraqi when we attacked them and we brought down their leader? Now, he wasn't everybody's leader. Saddam Hussein was an evil man, and most in the world would agree to that. But we brought down what was then recognized as a sovereign nation. I agree that that probably had to happen, but I think there are some optics when you go back and study that now. When you look in the rearview mirror, isn't it always funny how things are so much clearer after they happen? That when you have a moment to go back and reflect, you can see the things that maybe you would have done differently. That's where I think we are today. I think there's going to be a number of people who went to Capitol Hill yesterday with well-intended hearts, that they felt betrayed. They felt like maybe someone had stolen their vote or that their vote didn't count. And you know what? There may be truth in that. But we have a legislative branch. We have an executive branch. We have a judicial branch, both at the federal level and at the state level. And those votes were validated last night. That's the way our system works. Love it, hate it, say it's manipulated, say it needs to change. Okay. But last night, what I would argue with those folks who went into the Capitol building and breached the Capitol and got inside and sat in the president's chamber chair and inside the Senate, or inside the House, and then sat in Nancy Pelosi's chair. I'm not a big fan of Nancy Pelosi, but the guy broke into her office, or maybe he didn't, but someone did. They broke into her office. I can tell you this, if someone broke into my house because they didn't like my political standing, it would be a shit show. Okay? The People's House was broken into yesterday by thugs. I said it. The people who did that, who broke out windows, they went there to protest, but there was a group of people who went there for nothing but chaos and anarchy. They didn't have a plan. They didn't have a plan to overthrow a corrupt government. They didn't have a plan to implement a new government. They got there with no effing plan except to create chaos and crime. It didn't solve anything. All it did for my friends on the left is it gave them fodder to say, Kenny, see there? Told you so. All you Trumpies are just full of hot air and full of hate and discontent. And I would go, okay, you got me today because that's the optics of the lens that you're looking through. And I would say in some sense, I agree with a small part of that. Yesterday wasn't a good look for Republicans. Yesterday wasn't a good look for our president, our sitting president, who's about to leave office. I would say the president, again, politically, should be at a moment like that trying to sound the horn of civility. And I would say to my Christian friends who don't agree with that, is that while Jesus was hanging on the cross, he showed the absolute epitome of civility. He could have called down legions of angels. He could have taken a sinful, fallen world and said, you know what, guys? Snuff. You're done. I'm not doing this. God, I object to sacrificing and showing this example of sacrificial love, radical love. And I think that's what our next president needs to show. I think that's what our outgoing president needs to show. And I think he's got one more chance to do that. To show radical love and submission, even though your race may have been stolen from you. If we truly believe in the God of the universe, truth will prevail. But I think sometimes is that we Americans tend to think that God is only an American God, that he's only a God of Baptists, or he's only a God of Pentecostals, he's only a God of whatever faith you subscribe to. And I would ask you to step back and go, okay, if we really know, and I'm going to be cliche-ish here, and we go back to WWJD, wasn't that around back in the 90s? Yeah. And everybody was wearing wristbands back then. Well, what would Jesus do? Now, I don't know. I'm not Jesus, but I think when I look and I study scriptures and I read opinions on scripture and what theologians believe, I think yesterday Jesus would have stepped back and said, okay, we're following the law of Caesar, and it appears that our laws of Caesar say that there needs to be a peaceful transition of power. Love it, hate it, but that's the way our democratic republic works. A peaceful transition of power. I didn't vote for Joe Biden. I didn't vote for Kamala Harris. And I will tell you, this go around, I voted for Donald Trump in his first election against Hillary. I did not. I have some friends that say I threw away a vote. I voted for a guy named Lawrence Kotlikoff, who's an economist at Boston University that I have utmost respect for. But in all of what I'm sharing with you today, the main takeaway, this podcast is called Optics, this version. Let's look at the optics through which we view things. And what I would encourage you to do is take that lens that you're looking through and let's zoom out and then zoom back in. Zoom out again, zoom back in again. And really, before you take a stance on truth, know what truth is, but be okay with opinion. And be okay that others are going to look through an optic and look through a lens that may be slightly different than yours. You know, one of the things I say to my clients is that there are 3 things you can say to me when I give you advice or a recommendation. Let's say an insurance strategy or an annuity strategy. Is that, you know, you bring up those 2 words, insurance or annuity, in a financial talk, and man, there is lots of opinions, and there are lots of people out there that think, oh, those are horrible financial products. Okay. You have a right to that opinion. Let's study the optics for you specifically, you the individual, and see if that's necessarily true in your life. If it is, don't own it, don't buy it. If it's not, can you step back and take a look to see, is that in your best interest, and is it something that you should implement? That's the same thing I would say in terms of politics and what we're facing today, is that in this new beginning, in this next 4 years, let's look through the optics of who we have as our new setting president. And let's see how we can be civil, in that, for me, as a citizen who didn't vote for President Biden, President-elect Biden, can I still be civil and say that's my president? Yep, I can. Do I have to agree with him? No, I don't. What options do I have if I don't agree with that president? Number 1, the overarching argument is I can get the fuck out of this country. Excuse my French. I can leave. I got options. I can go to other countries if they will accept me, if they will allow me as a sovereign citizen. Where there are some people who think they, as an individual, is a sovereign and that they can be their own little bitty nation. So for some of us, we could leave. There are those who are doing that today. They're expatriates. They're leaving our country because they think the grass is greener on the other side. So I think for most Americans, I'd say probably 99% of us, that's not an option. Leaving this country is not in the cards. So if you can't leave, how about staying and making change? If you believe so wholeheartedly in your opinion, then get involved at the local level. Get involved. Get to know your local politicians. Get to know your mayor. Get to know your school board. We had a person on our show, Emily Bose, who has a podcast you should actually go check out, and it's Smart Citizen. Be a smart citizen. Understand your rights. Educate yourself more. Knowledge is power, but that's only part of it until you apply that knowledge. That's when it really becomes powerful. So what I would encourage you to do is really get more involved in your local elections, get more involved with your local politicians, get more involved with your representatives and your senators and your governor, and let them hear your voice more. If you wait for every 4 years to do this, that's what I would call the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and over again, but expecting a different result. You're effing stupid. Stop. You're not. I know you're not. I know I'm not. And I'm guilty, probably just like you, of not paying attention until 2 weeks before election. And then I grab my little pad of paper at the election booth and I go, oh, well, what does this person stand for? What do they stand for? Who am I voting? And I was talking to a few of my friends in our local election and school board people. I'm voting for school board people that I've never heard of. Shame on me. I was dumb enough to do that. That I didn't take the time to care enough about my community. And I'm apologizing to you right now. I did not take enough time to care about the kids in my community who have to submit to a superintendent of a school board at my local election. That, oh, my kids are all out of school now. It doesn't really matter to me. How selfish is that? Is what I'm saying to myself. You don't have to carry that shame and that guilt. That's for me to bear. But I would challenge you, if I'm feeling that way, I got to guess there's a few of you out there who can empathize with what I'm sharing with you today. Number one, we just got to take personal responsibility for the decisions that we make, good, bad, and indifferent. And number two, respect the decisions that others make when it's part of what we subscribe to, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of all men and all women. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to like them. And every couple of years, we get to go vote for our legislative, executive, and have some influence in who shows up in our judicial systems. And if you don't like it, change it. Or get the F out. That's what I wanted to say to you today. I spent an hour kind of just giving you my heart on this. Let's talk about some good news before we close out the show. Number one, come February, there's something great I've been working on for a long time, and I was able to find a group of developers and a team to help me get across the finish line, something I've been working on since 2012. I wrote a book in 2012 off the back of a business collapse that I'd had. I'd sold my financial services firm, bought another company, had some partners that were working with me. And long story short, I won't steal the thunder from the book. You can go read it. It's The Billionaire Within. And yes, if you buy the book, BlackBox Publishing, which owns KP's BlackBox and owns our literacy course I'm getting ready to launch. Yes, we get compensated. Yes, I'll make some money from that. And that's capitalism at work. But in that, I want to do well by doing good. I want to do well by sharing my experiences with other people that maybe I can help you and help your friends in your community improve. Not here to hurt anybody. It's here to, how do I expand horizons? How do I expand territories? How do I help someone get from where they are to where they want to be and do that in a well-meaning way? That's what we're supposed to be doing here in life, right? So The Billionaire Within. Go take a look at that book. They can pick it up on Amazon.com, right? We have a link we can give them, Ian. But in that link, inside the book, inside the digital book, you'll see that there is a hyperlink to BlackBox.net or BlackBoxSociety.net. That is a financial literacy platform and course that I've been working on for a number of years. And a few months ago, and all the way back to a relationship that goes back almost 25 years, ran into an old friend again who was able to help me get this across the finish line. So I'm very excited to let you know that a launch in February is coming of the BlackBox Society. So this society is going to be a financial literacy platform that really helps consumers understand how financial systems work, how financial products work, how interest rates and amortization and loans and investments and insurance across the board, how these different products work. The number one thing that I have found in interviewing new clients is that they sometimes are too embarrassed to say they don't know. This financial literacy system is going to give you and empower you the opportunity to know and know your known knowns and be comfortable with those unknown knowns through an educational platform. We're not there to give you investment advice. We're not there to promote any specific financial product or service. It's education. And we're not giving it out necessarily for free because we will build on it. And we will then have professionals inside that system that will be able to give you specific strategy from duly licensed individuals or companies. And for my clients at Kenneth Porter and Company, who underwrites our show and is a sponsor and advertiser for BlackBox, there are areas that we're licensed in that if you buy a financial product or service, we will earn a commission or fee for that business. And that'll be fully disclosed to you. But inside the BlackBox publishing community, inside the BlackBox Society, the literacy course, if you're a client of my firm, you will be able to have access to that platform for less than a cup of coffee each day. Actually, it'll be about $149 a year. If you're not a client of my firm, it'll be about $1 a day or about $360 a year. And you'll have full access and you'll have a sneak peek. You'll have a free look period to be able to go in and decide whether or not the platform's for you. If it's not, it won't cost you a dime. If it is and you decide you want to be a membership, you can do it on a monthly basis or you can do it on an annual basis. And we're really excited to share our thoughts, our strategies, our teaching with you, our growing community. We're thankful for you. We love you guys. And go out and be nice to someone today. It's your choice to do that. You have a choice between being evil and being nice and loving on someone. Go let someone know today who may not carry your political beliefs, who may not carry your religious beliefs, who may not subscribe to the things that you subscribe to. Go be a good citizen. Go let them know that you care about them as a human being. And see what happens. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Hey, God bless you. Love you. Thanks for tuning into the Black Box. We'll see you.